We were putting students out into clinical practice with this idea that the tutors would follow them out into the clinical practice and teach what they taught in the classroom. That never went down well with the hospital physios, because they reckoned they could teach just as well as we did. And they possibly, some of them could, but we knew that they weren't necessarily going to teach the way we had, because they hadn't been in the classroom. And they thought that we had no particular expertise in teaching because we hadn't done our teachers in Britain, like all teachers of physiotherapy had done. So, and they were, rightly or wrongly, resentful of us working for education on a miles bigger salary than they were getting in health. And here we would swan into the hospital, take their patients, teach our students, muck up their day. They were answerable to the clinicians, the doctors, with whatever we did with the student and the patient. And they, at the end of the day, were left holding the baby, as it were. I could see their point of view. So they were reluctant to have students. They didn't trust us. They didn't know what the students would do. They resented our pay structure, our holiday structure, and that they were answerable at the end of the day to the doctors that they worked for. So my job was to try and find placements for 60 students around Auckland, and I went to every single clinical outlet. The big hospitals were obvious, but they would limited us in number. We were allowed to say we wanted to send 20 students to Middlemore, they'd say you can send 10. Auckland, the same. Some just wouldn't have us at all. And the limitation on the tutors going in to supervise what they were doing was huge. The fact that we then went off on holiday and left them with a caseload, understandable. I'd been there. Not with it. Dunedin students were never a worry because there were never more than about 16 of them scattered throughout Auckland. So to have 60 was a totally different ball game. What hours were they going to work? Did they go in the afternoon or the morning? Did they go all day? And when we had second and third year students in, we couldn't have 60 plus 60 in the hospital. It would be completely impossible. Did we have special student patients? Was it fair on the patients? All these issues had to be talked through with the clinicians, with the hospital, with the nursing staff into whose wards we went. The ward sisters could be vicious. And AIT had to be prepared in the end to pay certain people in clinical who were working in the hospitals a little bit of money to help oversee, because we were spread too thin, because we not only had to teach at the school, we had to supervise in the clinical field. So I got in my car and went round and saw every possible outlet for student experience I could think of. And it was exhausting and rewarding. Some were great. I'd come home and burst into tears. I was so exhausted. And Fran supported me but didn't help me. I think, to give her due, she left me to do it, and I think it was better that one person did it. And she supported me entirely when it had to go to a higher authority, like AIT people, to say, come on, you've got to give 2 tutors in that, 2 people in that hospital X amount of money to help supervise students. That was where she was a good bargainer and a tough one. She got what we needed to get. I think we should have planned it all before it started. But with hindsight, we didn't have the time. And I think it took about 5 years before they really accepted us as people that knew what we were trying to do. 5 years minimum, maybe more. I could talk, it was really very personal, some of it too. People came and went, and some were really good and some were really horrible. In the hospital staff. But I think the students learned really well. You had to make their experience meaningful for them. So if they were in a tough situation with the clinicians in one hospital, you had to make sure they went to the next hospital where they were very friendly towards us, so that they, for instance, say they went to Middlemore, where on the whole the experience was good orthopaedically, and they did ward work. Well, you might find that when they did their outpatient work, they went to a hospital which wasn't quite so student-friendly, so that they didn't get the false impression that everything was easy. And you had to make that fair for the student, because in the end of the day they had to know what they were doing in clinical practice. So you had to also make sure that if they had a good neuro experience, that was their lot. They didn't get another good neuro experience. They perhaps had an indifferent one where they were left a bit more on their own, or had just a not so good person. It wasn't until we had our own graduates working in the hospital, which took 3 to 4 years, you see, before they were back working in the hospital, that we had a more friendly environment. So the first 3 years of clinical practice were really pretty antagonistic.